All right, so now we're going to actually get into the PPP forgiveness forms. So let's start with the form 3508S. Let's talk about the safe harbors and the related information. So what I want to point out first and foremost is that if you have a $50,000 or less loan, there is no FTE requirement, nor is there a reduction in compensation requirement that you have to meet. Okay, so again, for loans that are 50,000 or less, and as you remember from what I showed you on a slide earlier, that's I think over 85% of the loans that we did this year are 50,000 or less. You do not have to show full-time equivalent status for your employees and comply with any requirements related to that. And you do not have a requirement for complying with maintaining your compensation of your employees, whether it's salary or hourly wage, at least 75% of their pre-COVID wage. So again, $50,000 or less, if that's your loan amount, you have no compliance requirements, and you can just submit your application. If your loan amount is over $50,000 and up to $150,000, then you do have to certify that you have met the full-time equivalency requirement and you complied with maintaining your compensation of your employees, whether it was salary or hourly wage rate, at least 75% of pre-COVID levels. All right. And again, what I just want to say with that is, if you feel like you have issues with either one of those requirements, then you will need to use the 3508 form as a worksheet. Okay. The FTE requirement is that the borrower did not reduce the number of employees or the average paid hours between January 1, 2020 and the end of the covered period, or you could not return to the same level of business activity as before February 15th, 2020 due to compliance with the guidance or requirements of three federal agencies, one of the three federal agencies, I should say, or our governor's requirements as guidance was established. And again, some of you may not be in Washington, so it may not be Governor Inslee. It may be a governor of one of our other states. But just keep in mind, if you had to shut down or your business was impacted directly or indirectly as a result of the guidance issued by one of the three federal agencies or your governor, then you have a safe harbor. Okay, and you do not have to comply with the full-time equivalency requirement. The other thing is that, depending on how you look at it, it's either, you know, we don't want you to have reduced the wages by more than 25%, or in other words, we want you to have paid your employees at least 75% of their pre-COVID wage. So that's the wage reduction issue that we're looking at here. And the borrower did not reduce wages by more than 25% during the covered period compared to the most recent full quarter before their covered period. So what does all that mean? Well, in plain English, if you got a loan last year, you're comparing your compensation to your employees from first quarter 2020 to the wage or salary that you paid them during your covered period. If you got your loan this year, then you're looking at first quarter 2021 as compared to your covered period for the wages, hourly wages or salaried compensation. All right. Next slide. So now we're going to just dig into the form. All right. Here is the top of the first page of the 3508S form. And I filled this one out as for example purposes, but you want to put in your business's legal name and the physical address of the business. you want to put in your most recent NAICS code that you're using for your business and your trade name. The business tax identification number may be the employer identification number or the social security number, and it could also be an ITIN. Okay. And what I want to emphasize with the tax ID number is that has to match what your original application tax identification number was. So if you're uncertain, please contact your lender, because there may be some of you out there that have a limited liability company or a sub-S corporation that used a Schedule C on your 1040 tax return to report your business income and expenses. If you use a Schedule C, both your EIN and your Social Security number appear on that document. And it was a little bit random as to what the lenders actually used. So please make sure you check with your lender if you're in that situation. Your business contact information for the primary contact, the business phone, and the email address. That's, of course, your choice, but I would encourage you to put the contact information of someone who's going to be with the business long-term and not necessarily a CPA or an attorney who may exit the organization for responsibility here before you get through this full forgiveness process. So really focus on having someone in the business that's going to be there long-term, be the contact information that you include. Just some tips here that I do want to say. Some of you may have had to move your business, and your business address may be different than what you had at the time of application. So what I want you to make sure is that you also include information that is with the Secretary of State or the Department of Revenue as applicable to evidence your actual physical address for your business if there was a change, and include that with your paperwork. The same thing is true for the NAICS code. If you did have a NAICS code change for any reason, please go into the Department of Revenue information and give a screen print of the NAICS code that is used with your company right now. So the Secretary of State website is www.sos.wa.gov. Department of Revenue is www.dor.wa.gov. And there's a tremendous amount of information on both of those websites as it relates to helping you fill out this particular section or a table on this document. As we go below the table, what you see is the option to select either a first draw application or a second draw. Again, you can only choose one or the other as applicable. The reason for that is because each one of these loans has a different SBA PPP loan number and a different lender PPP loan number. If you do not know your SBA PPP loan number, your lender should have that, or you can contact us at the Seattle District Office and we can look it up for you. I do have our number in a slide at the end, so I'm not going to give you that right now. The lender PPP loan number should be on the note payable that you signed when you obtained the loan. You do need to list your PPP loan amount and the loan funding date or disbursement date. For some lenders, that may be the date on the note. For other lenders, it's actually going to be the date you receive the funds. So please check with your lender for compliance there to make sure you're using the proper date, especially if it impacts your covered period. All right, you do need to list the number of employees at the time of loan application and at the time of forgiveness application. Your covered period needs to range from a minimum of 56 days to a maximum of 168 days, okay? What changed this year is that instead of mandatorily using either one date or the other, you may now select any end date between 56 days to 168 days, any date in between. So if you want to have a covered period that's 90 days or 95 days, you can do that. That's within your control. You just need to make sure that you've spent all of your PPP money within that time frame. All right. And the covered period start date is day one of your covered period in terms of the count, and it should match your loan disbursement date a couple of lines above. All right. Now, I do, as we drop down below the covered period information, I do want you to see that if the borrower, together with affiliates, either had a loan of $2 million or more, or in aggregate with your affiliates, you do need to mark that box, and only mark that box if you have the $2 million or more requirement met, because you don't want to put yourself in an automatic audit situation by marking that accidentally. And then on this form only, what you do need to put in here is the amount spent on payroll costs, and then your requested loan forgiveness amount. Now, in this example, I put that all the money went to payroll, but it could be different. The one thing I do want to point out here is that if your amount of funds spent on payroll costs is less than 60% of your PPP loan amount, you will not be allowed to have full forgiveness on your PPP loan. All right. How you would calculate your PPP loan forgiveness amount then is by taking the amount you spent on payroll and dividing it by 60%. That is the maximum amount of loan forgiveness you would be allowed. All right. Now, what I want you to see is, again, on the top here, everything above if the borrower, where you're marking the box, if your loan amounts $2 million or above, all the way up to the top, that is identical on all three application forms. I'm only going to go over that piece one time for efficiency purposes. All right. But the rest of the documents then change. So let's go down to the next slide, and you'll see the bottom of page 1 of the 3508S form. You have to initial both of these statements regarding representations and certifications on behalf of the borrower. Again, both of these need to be true and correct and initialed by the authorizer representative for the borrower submitting the application. The first one is compliance with the use of the proceeds and calculation of your loan forgiveness amount. You are certifying that that amount is true and correct. The other one right below that has to do with the fact that you are truthfully completing the application. And a signature by the authorizer representative of the borrower is required. You do need to print the name, the date of the application, and the title of the authorizer representative. All right. So if your financial institution allows you to do this manually, again, you're going to do it, manually. If it's electronic, then you will be, again, initialing and signing electronically. So that's consistent with all of these forms. All right. So if your loan amount is $150,000 or less, this is the document that you sign, complete, and send in. The only thing that I do want to let you know is that if it's a second draw and you did not provide evidence about your reduction in revenue at the time you applied with your lender, you would have to provide that now at the time of forgiveness. So that would be the only other document potentially that you would need to provide, and that would be on the second draw applications only. Okay, next slide, please. On all of the application forms, whether they're manual or electronic, there is this section on the demographic data. It is optional, But what I want you to know is the reason we asked for this is it's the only way we can truly document and report back to Congress the demographic data of the owners of the businesses who received PPP funds. So if you look at instruction number 3, it gives you the definition of who is a principal. And then when you look down toward the table, you see that we're looking for information on veteran status, gender, race, and ethnicity, okay, for each person who it meets the definition of a principal for the organization. So again, this is optional data. It is for reporting purposes only for the SBA to report back to Congress when they ask about this particular section of information. Okay, it does not impact your forgiveness whatsoever.